The national security people are playing the long game. And the long game for them is that nothing happens anywhere on the globe that they don't have access to. Collect it all, manage it all. I understand why they have that philosophy, but it's a disaster for the rest of us.
Cindy Cohn is the executive director of the Electronic Frontier Foundation. She first became involved with them in 1993 when she was asked to serve as the lead attorney on Bernstein versus the Department of Justice. She has a long list of accolades and awards, and co-hosts EFF's How to Fix the Internet podcast, and recently released her first book, Privacy's Defender. So first of all, thank you so much for sitting down and talking to us.
Oh, thank you.
Our first question today, what do you feel was the most impactful case of your career that you litigated?
I mean, I think it's got to be the Bernstein case because we freed up encryption. So much of the internet and the security and privacy we have today depends on encryption. It would have been a very different internet without that. Don't get me wrong, we still don't have a secure or private enough internet, but in terms of just the sheer amount of help we were able to give to the world, I think the Bernstein case stands alone.
You can feel free to say same answer, but what case are you most proud of?
Oh, that's such a hard decision. I mean, I'm definitely proud of the Bernstein case. I'm also very proud of the work we did against NSA spying because we were able to chip away in a time when it was a lot harder to confront the national security infrastructure, and because we inspired so many people to get involved. I think that was the biggest kind of public effort that we did. I mean, we did lots of little things that aren't in the book that I'm very proud of. One of them was, we defended some people who made a video using "This land is made for you and me," and we ended up getting "This land is made for you and me" into the public domain, recognized into the public domain. So as a, that felt really good as well. So
cool. Yeah,
I noticed the Jib Jab case.
Yeah, I noticed the book had like 3 kind of like big cases per se, and NSA was one of them.
Yep.
So on the note of the NSA, the EFF has a long history of trying to rein in government surveillance, or government specifically, but these days government surveillance, to me, seems to focus a lot more on surveillance capitalism. Like they buy a lot of location data from private companies and stuff like that. So do you still feel that it's best to focus on government, or should we be trying to rein in companies?
Well, I think that this presents a kind of a false choice.
Okay.
Because we don't have an option to decide which one. In fact, all of the spying that I talk about in the book depends on the government drafting off of private companies. The NSA spying is the telecommunications company. It's AT&T. And in fact, we sued AT&T first and then only secondarily sued the NSA. So, and the national security letter cases that I talk about are a situation in which the government goes to our service providers and gets information from them and then gags them forever from telling us. So it was never really a choice. I think that now, though, that it's a lot clearer how much information about us the government is gathering from private companies, and they're the number one purchaser from data brokers and using in situations that are very far afield from the kind of narrow scope of national security investigations. But now we're seeing it used in all sorts of investigations. I think I just saw that a license plate reader was used to give a bicyclist a ticket. I mean, it's really, it's become part and parcel of law enforcement's arsenal, such that we have to address both, right? And I don't know that we will get to the bottom of the government misuse of things unless we address the corporate collection of all this data. But in either event, we don't have the option or the luxury of choosing one or the other.
So are the issues that the EFF is dealing with now the same ones that you expected to be dealing with when EFF formed? And I was kind of reminded in the book, you said sometimes you felt like Cassandra, that you were issuing warnings that nobody heeded. So like, for example, was surveillance capitalism one of those things you saw coming, or?
I don't think we saw surveillance capitalism, but we did warn for a long time that the government having so much data about us could easily be marshaled against us, right? I mean, Frank Church, the Church Commission, and some of the early work, he called it the abyss from which we cannot come back if we didn't stop mass spying. Ed Snowden called it turnkey totalitarianism. So that's the Cassandra part. We've been saying for a while, all this collection and analysis of data about us in our everyday lives could very easily be turned into something that is marshaled against us by leaders who wanted to do so. And I think we're living in a time when people are really starting to see that come to fruition, very literally, and their neighbors are being picked up out of because of data about them that the government has collected or bought. So I think that in that way, I think we did anticipate this moment when government would be willing to really marshal this evidence, this information against us. And I think if you think it's going to stop with just the categories of people who they're targeting now, you're going to misunderstanding how history works. And we're already seeing it being marshaled against protesters, against people who are engaging in their First Amendment right to film the police. And I don't think there's any reason to believe it will stop there. But having said that, I'm not sure that I personally anticipated the absolute domination that surveillance capitalism would come to make. We called it creepy but legal when Google started placing ads just based on scanning people's search terms and things like that.
The contextual ads.
The contextual ads, like we thought that was creepy but legal, and I still think it is creepy but legal, but it's nothing compared to what came after. And I don't know that I anticipated that it would become the predominant business model online. And some of that is due to the consolidation of the industry, which is also something that I'm not sure I saw. In the 90s and the early 2000s, there were little companies that were coming, eating the big companies' lunch. You might have started off with Alta Vista search, and then you used a Yahoo search, and
Ask Jeeves.
Ask Jeeves, and then there was a rolling that stopped with Google, right? And it didn't stop because there was no better way to search the internet. It stopped because of the consolidation and some business forces, the refusal of the United States to enforce antitrust law in a way that really protected competition, and instead falling prey to some other theories. Those are things that kind of happened outside tech that I would say, as a constitutional lawyer, thinking about the First and Fourth Amendment, I didn't foresee, because it really kind of affected our rights, but kind of came from this other direction that isn't really where we lived, but now has tremendous implications for free speech, for privacy. But it really came out of the business side. And so I think those are a couple of things that we didn't quite foresee. Of course, we pivoted. EFF has been talking about consumer privacy for a long time. We have definitely I've got a whole section of the organization devoted to that, and another section devoted to competition. So we were able to pivot and grow and meet those moments. But if you'd asked 1996 Cindy if that was where we were going to go, I would not have put those on the list.
Yeah, it's very holistic. I like you pointing that out. It's things that happen over here can still affect our privacy.
Yeah, and we're living in a time now where I think that the attacks on privacy are coming from so many different directions that it's easy for people to feel overwhelmed. And I totally get that. On the other hand, I really believe it's foundational, like not just around kind of consumer issues, but increasingly so as we're seeing price discrimination, right? The amount you pay for something being based on all the other things that the company knows about you from surveillance, rather than a fairness or how much the thing is worth or anything like that, but really maximizing out. And I think it's starting to hit people a lot more clearly than it used to. And I think it feels very unfair, but also in the context of government surveillance. So I think that we are in a time where we're seeing some of the impacts of this. And it feels like it's coming from all directions sometimes. But, the other reason I care about this isn't about the consumer side as much. The other reason I care about this a lot is I think privacy is fundamental to democracy, to self-government. Privacy is a way that we have the people who have less power have protection from people who have more power, right? That little zone of privacy is how we can navigate the world in which we might have a government that we want to change. We might have, my colleague Eva Galperin works with domestic violence victims. These are people who need privacy from people in their own home in order to plan their escape for their lives. So whether it's in your own home or all the way up to I want to be able to vote for who I want to and not have the government know. It's why we have a secret ballot in the United States. Privacy is kind of embedded into many of the ways that people with less power get protected against people who have more power.
I remember you mentioned in the book, and I've heard this argument from other people too, that like the founding fathers needed privacy to do what they did. Perfect example. So
yeah, absolutely. And Jefferson has a cipher. If you go to Monticello,
I think you mentioned that.
It's a physical thing. You can see the little, turn the things of it. And of course, he was in Paris, and John Adams was in London. and the rest of the founding fathers, the Continental Congress was in the United States. They had to have a way to communicate with each other across distances that wouldn't be read by the British, and they used cryptography. So, whether you're an originalist or somebody who's really modern, like freeing up cryptography, I think makes perfect sense.
Little bit shift of direction. But as a personal note, I want to say thank you for saying in your book that you weren't really drawn to computers as much as other hackers, because I grew up a little bit sheltered, so I kind of missed the days of like BBSs and IRC and all that kind of stuff. And I really appreciate the message that I took away from that is that there's room for people in the privacy space beyond just developers and coders, and like it's for everybody.
So much, right? We all need privacy no matter what we do. But I also think that one of the things that technical privacy hasn't been as widely spread and understood because it has seemed like it's stuck in this little world. And if you're not technical, you can't engage in it. You can't do with it. And I am trying to break that out a little bit because I don't think we're going to win. I mean, I'm a strategist in my heart. Like we're not going to win if the only people who understand how important privacy are people who have other technical skills. So I think it's really great that you were drawn to it and you feel like you can have a place in trying to protect privacy regardless of, whether you can write an encryption cipher in your spare time. Right.
You said that the moment you read John Perry Barlow's Declaration of the Independence of Cyberspace, you disagreed with it.
Yes.
Would you explain why, please?
Yeah. Oh boy. Barlow and I went round and round about this. I mean, we became very close in the end of our lives. So he's a dear friend, and I understand why he did it. So I want to say, Barlow was trying to project something onto the world in hopes that it would make itself manifest. And what he really wanted was the idea that the digital world could be better than the offline world. It could be a place that was more fair, more just, that would treat people equally regardless of who they were or where they come from or what color of their skin was. He really came out of a view that maybe this technology could help make things better. And so he projected it as if, oh, weary giants of flesh and steel, you have no jurisdiction. I mean, he was a beautiful writer too.
Oh, yeah.
But like the whole point of it was to try to say, old world, hands off. We were building something new and we're trying to build something better. So that I think is gorgeous. It's beautiful, but it is aspirational. And the problem that I had with it is I think a lot of people took him, he didn't say, oh, this is my aspiration. He projected it as if it was an absolute truth. And of course it's not. First of all, we have brought most of the problems of the non-digital world into the digital world, but also this idea that governments would have no say in what was going on online wasn't realistic even when he wrote it, because wherever your feet touch the ground, you're subject to the jurisdiction, and those cops and FBI and NSA, they can come get you. The fact that you did it online is not going to mean that you don't face any consequences for what happens in the offline world. And I think he was trying to do something that inspired people. And honestly, he inspired a lot of people. But I think that the realist in me and the lawyer in me had a hard time thinking about it in inspirational terms. And I think it also led a lot of people to think that the digital world was magically going to be better, like it was inherently going to be better. And I don't think Barlow thought that at all. He founded the EFF, you don't found an organization committed to digital civil liberties and hire fighty lawyers like me if you think it's magically going to be better. But I think the way and the posture in which he made the declaration led a lot of people to think both that it was inevitable and that it was already here. I do think Barlow and I might have disagreed about some of it.
Sure.
But I think, again, he was a poet trying to inspire people, and I'm a lawyer trying to litigate. And I would say 80% of our disagreement was due to just that difference in where we sit.
Similarly, you said that Barlow said that no one gives you your rights, you have to take them.
Yes.
But Edward Snowden argues that nobody has to defend their rights. Rather, the government, for example, has to argue why they need to take them away. So who do you think is right? Are we born with those rights and somebody has to explain why they're taking them, or we have to go and get them?
I mean, I think this is one where Barlow's living in the world of the real and Snowden is living in the world of the philosophical, right? I mean, I believe that we all have inalienable rights, that we're born, we have these rights, they're part of the deal of being born in the United States. You might have a slightly different set of rights if you're born somewhere else. And I think we all should have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights just by virtue of being born on this earth. So I do think that they are inherent. And I think that Ed's right to say that the justification for taking them away should be on the burden should be on the government who's trying to take them away, not on us trying to defend them. I think what Barla was saying was the reality is you can't just sit back and expect that to happen. We have to take our rights. We have to defend them. We have to know, but that the reality of the lived world is that we're not going to have a First Amendment online unless we stand up and we say we want the First Amendment online. We're not going to have the Fourth Amendment in our, EFF was started because of some Secret Service raids and cop raids on early bulletin board systems where the government took the position that the Fourth Amendment just didn't apply. And one of our very first cases, called the Steve Jackson Games case, was to establish that indeed the Fourth Amendment did apply. Now, you could say that I think of that as us taking our rights, but it's not like us taking our rights and creating new ones. It was us establishing that this new context doesn't diminish our rights. So I think Ed's right that they shouldn't have even tried, which is kind of
would be nice.
Yeah, and I think Barla's right that we can't just sit back and assume that the government and society are going to protect our rights. We have to give it a fight.
Before we continue, if you like videos like this one, consider becoming a Privacy Guides member or donating at privacyguides.org/donate. Privacy Guides is an impartial, community-driven nonprofit that's focused on building a strong privacy advocacy community and delivering the best digital privacy and consumer technology rights advice on the internet. Supporting our mission by becoming a member grants you exclusive perks like early access to video content, priority during our live stream Q&As, a badge on our forum, and the warm, fuzzy feeling of supporting independent media. And now for the rest of my interview with Cindy Cohn. So shifting gears a little bit, in your memoir, you talked about a certain trip you took to a music festival where you made some lifelong friends, and you said that, quote, having a place of identity outside of law and technology has been critical to my ability to keep doing the work, even when it's hard or we don't win or have our wins snatched away. So if you could, I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that, because I've seen a lot of people in the privacy space burn out from just doing too much, doing more than they need to. And I think that is really important for people to have that space they can get away from.
Yeah, I mean, this is part of why I wanted to write this as a memoir is I did want to include some of the ways that you do this for the long run. And that's both because I think it's fun and important, but also strategic. Like the government attorneys on the other side, they have 30-year careers. Like if we are taking people and they're burning out after 2 or 3 years, we're always in, the eternal kindergarten or first grade of on our side, and they're, in junior high, right? Or high school, whatever you want to take the metaphor. So for me anyway, it is true that having a community of people outside of the work where I do something else and I'm not the leader has been the way I've balanced being the leader in kind of some of these long and hard fights. And, it happened for me that it was a community of people who I go see music with. And we create our own little festival every year. And in that world, I am not the head of it. I am not the executive director of my friends. If in many ways I'm, very much a follower and let other people lead in that, because putting that down too, I just think that when you're fighting and you're fighting for your rights and you're in these long battles, you've got to be able to take off your armor sometimes. You've got to be able to show up without that. And this is the space where I'm able to do that. And it really does nurture me. You put down your armor, you go over here, you listen to some music for a while, dance with your friends, and then you can come back and put the armor on and you're ready for the next thing. And I think finding that balance, and what works for me won't work for other people. But I think that finding that balance for folks is really, really important if you want to keep doing this for the long run. My husband has also been doing this kind of work for a very long time. And, he builds Blinky art,
Oh, that's cool.
And so, he's a pretty geeky person, but he does electronics, right? His daytime work, he does software for human rights. And in the evening he comes home and he's hooking up little blinky lights. So not everybody, but I think the way to do this in a healthy way for the long run and not burn yourself out is to find something else that feeds you that isn't that work.
I can relate to that. I have some other spaces where I'm like, I'm not really Nate. And so
Yeah.
I can, even though I'm not an executive director, obviously, I have that space where I'm not Nate from Privacy Guides. I can be this other person, and it's great.
Yeah. And I think, being able to, not everybody can compartmentalize like that, but I think if you can, it does, it gives you a cushion.
It helps a lot.
Yeah.
And on that note, as you noted in your book, we often take more losses than wins. Are there any other ways to stay motivated in the face of such a long, drawn-out uphill battle?
I mean, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, I like to win. There is that old saying, the real victory was the friends we made along the way. And I don't subscribe to that. It's not a substitute. We need to win because people's lives are at stake, and it's important. On the other hand, you do meet amazing people. You do get incredible things to happen in your lives. And again, some of them are stepping away for a while, but some of them are just like building a team, having a team that works together, sharing the losses and the things so you don't feel so alone. We used to joke at EFF that we had an outrage stick and like a talking stick, and that we would pass it around. And, one day something would happen and you'd be the person holding the outrage stick and you'd be really upset. And all the rest of the team would be like there for you going, yeah, that really sucks. And we're here for you. And then the next day it's somebody else who holds the outrage. We would pass it around so that we would kind of take turns, both being the people who are really upset, but also the people who are not at the moment. And so can hold, can kind of hold it together while you take your moment to be really pissed off. That's another way that you kind of, share the load a little bit with other people. I really think that, I say that privacy is a team sport. And I mean that kind of literally, and that you've got to communicate with people. But I also think I mean it in a organizing way. Like having a team, having a group of people that you're doing this with, and they don't have to be physically present. The digital world makes it possible, but having people who you're in it with is one of the ways that I have certainly held it together over the long run.
I have to ask, because I follow her on Mastodon, how often does Eva get the outrage stick?
Yeah, for a while, I don't know if I should say, and for a while,
we can cut it if you want.
Eva had a little thing on her door at EFF that said "Outrage Fairy." She was an outrage fairy.
I love her. She's fantastic.
I don't think she certainly takes her turn, right? But she has other times where she's there with for everybody else. But yeah, absolutely.
She's so passionate online. That was my first thought. I'm like, I bet she has that a lot.
She definitely has it. She has her share. But she's also just more vocal, right?
Oh, that's fair.
She's just more willing to be out there
Yeah.
In things. And I really, really appreciate that. I'm not somebody who's as public a person as Eva is. This is a new experience for me. But yeah, I think that she does a good job of expressing outrage and channeling other people's outrage as well. And kind of, and the other thing that I think she's really brilliant at is pointing it in the right direction, right? People get upset, and Eva's analysis of where you should be mad helps a lot of people kind of focus in on the bigger picture bad guys rather than the smaller picture bad guys, know? And also, it's really easy in this world. I'm getting a little philosophical, but we have another phrase at EFF, which is point your guns outside the tent. With the idea that you're working with other people and they may not see things the same way you do. They may have a slightly different set of priorities. They may have a different way of doing it, and trying to understand the difference between the people who are basically on your side but who you disagree with on strategy or tactics or priorities, and making sure that you're not spending your energy shooting at them and actually shooting at the people who you're all trying to prevail against. And recognizing those differences and not getting caught up in that. Because I've seen that happen in a lot of joint actions sometimes too. And people end up more pissed at their friends than they are at their enemies. And I'm always like, you can have hard conversations and talk about it, but like the guns should be pointed outside the tent.
Absolutely. You said later in the same passage when you were talking about the music festival, you said that community is my refueling place. Like we talked about, it's good to have balance and everything, but can you speak to the importance of community?
I think both inside and outside the movement. Again, you can look at it purely strategic, which is one person by themselves cannot do nearly the amount that a bunch of people together can. And it's not just one by one, it gets exponential, right? When you get enough people together. So I think as a strategy matter, like one person is never I mean, like we love these little narratives about the single person
Yeah.
who changed the world. That is never the case in
Mhm.
any of the things that I've done, except in very, very small situations. And even then, when you touch on them, even when you talk to people who are like, oh, you invented blah, 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 they'll be like, well, yeah, but that's because Bill invented this and Joe invented this and Sally invented this. And then I came along and I just added this little bit on top. And now I get all the attention. And I've seen this on the technical and the non-technical side. So strategically, community is critical, right? Having a bunch of people who are doing this together. But it's also just a place, again, where you can put on a different persona, take a different tact and refuel, really get your energy back. And that's how it's worked for me. Again, I'm an extrovert. I like people. I know there are many, many people who are committed to privacy for whom the idea that they need to go to a music festival to get it will recoil them. And I am absolutely not saying that. I'm using my story to try to help people see what is it for you. And it might be being all by yourself with your cats for the weekend. That might be the best refueling that you could do, or whatever. I think that it's not important what it is. It's important that there is a refueling place.
On that note, how do you think, especially in the privacy community, how do you think we can foster healthy communities?
Well, I think we have to give each other grace. I think if somebody comes in and they want to help, you welcome them. Don't give them a litmus test about whether they're cool enough or they know enough about the tech or any of those kinds of things that are sometimes done in some of these communities that I think are very unwelcoming and unhealthy. I joke that good guys have better parties, but what I mean is like bring some joy. Like this is hard work. We don't always win, but that doesn't mean we have to be sad all the time or unhappy all the time. There is so much room for joy and engagement in this that helps people in it for the long run, but also helps attract people to it. So I think those are all things to think about. I also think, thinking about kind of doable short-term goals, even while you're aimed at the longer one. So inside EFF, we had these long cases and I talk about them in the book. In between them, we had lots of short cases that we would win easily. We did a whole set of cases that we call John Doe cases that are helping people have the right to speak anonymously online, such that the government, whoever's mad at them has to make a showing that they did something wrong before they get their names. So that, people would have a website that says like, Tesla sucks. And this is an example. It's not a real case that I know of, but like, then the companies would come and try to scare them out of having that place, in part by trying to identify them and worry about retaliation. We would take these cases just periodically along with a bunch of other people. And we started moving the law very slowly towards, if you want somebody's if they're anonymous and you want their identity, you have to make at least a threshold level showing that they did something wrong, not just that you're mad at them. And thereby we protected these things. The thing about the John Doe cases is their emotion that happens at the very beginning of the case. The whole thing is usually over within 60 days. And a lot of the times we won. I think most of the times we won. Occasionally we wouldn't win, but like having little wins in the middle of the big fights and thinking about the work in that way, like, is there a chunk we can do now, even while we're doing the longer chunk? Like that kind of balance is very helpful for longevity as well. And not every fight has those, but if you can get your local community to decide that they need, more transparency from the license plate reader company that your law enforcement's using, and make them do a report about how they work, like you might be able to get that on your way to maybe getting the city council to decide to unplug them. So thinking about like what's doable in the short term, as long as the short term isn't getting in the way of the longer term, you might be able to get some wins, get some momentum, bring other people into the cause by doing something that is a little easier to do than your long-term goals.
In the book, you mentioned jawboning, which is when governments put inappropriate pressure on companies to get them to do things that the government wants. This is kind of 3 questions. How frequent is this? How can projects defend themselves against this? And how can those of us on the outside of those projects know if this is happening or not? I feel like this is a big concern with a lot of privacy people.
There's a lot of privacy people. Jawboning is something that used to be pretty rare and something that people on the right would complain about. It kind of grew up during the COVID era when a lot of people on the right felt like the Biden administration was going too far and trying to get information, get speech taken down off the internet. And there was a Supreme Court case that happened about that set the standard. I wouldn't say we were exactly happy with it, but it wasn't too bad. But the Trump administration has ramped up jawboning tremendously, and
Yeah.
they're not even hiding it anymore. And the EFF is representing IceBlock so this is a
Oh, cool.
little app that helps people report where they see ICE arrests that the government, Kristi Noem, when she was the head of DHS, got taken down off of the Apple Store and the Play Store.
Google like proactively did it after.
But we don't know how proactive it was because we don't know what's going on in the background.
Sure.
But yeah, they did. They both took them down, and Apple's actually taken down some other ones. They're not even close to that, right? They're now self-censoring these kinds of things. So the jawboning worked really well. It worked so well that the companies are now proactively taking down perfectly lawful tools.
Fun.
So we're seeing a lot more of it, and we're in this litigation to try to push back on it. How can you know that's happening? Well, sometimes sometimes the app providers don't even know for a while. I mean, the app stores are it's pretty hard to know what's actually going on if your app gets taken down. They're not very good at being responsive, but pushing on that. I mean, so the app, it's happening in app stores now. So I'm talking about in terms of app, but it can happen in any context. But having the people who are, actually interacting and putting it up on the app store tell the community is a really important thing. They are very rarely gagged. I don't think there's a situation in which they're gagged. Sometimes they're quiet because they're trying to negotiate. One of the ways people have traditionally tried to figure out these kinds of things is things like warrant canaries. I would say that they haven't been nearly as useful as people have thought they would, in part because people don't check them very much, and so you don't know what's
They're a little
going on.
controversial.
I'm a little hesitant to endorse them fully, but it is a strategy that some app developers have used for other kinds of government coming in and gagging them. I think most of these app store takedowns are not. There's no gag. There's no secrecy that the creator of the app is in a position where they can't tell the community. It's always just that the app stores are not forthcoming about what's going on or why. And I don't know that there's too much we can do about that absent, like congressional investigations or the FTC or, assuming a government, or even your state, state AGs or state folks, I don't think the federal government is going to be your friend if the federal government is the one getting them taken down.
Fair.
Although at this point, look, Kristi Noem came out and said we did it. Like it used to be, it was kind of secret, and now it's not secret at all. They're very proud that they have the power to take things out of app stores. So it may be that the community doesn't need to worry about the secrecy. They just need to mobilize against what's actually happening, because I don't think it's that big a secret anymore, at least with this administration.
Yeah, I've seen some app developers have, like you said, that stuff's been taken down and they've talked about it online, and they've been like, not for jawboning reasons, I think, but they've posted like, they said it was for this reason, so I emailed them back and I'm like, the code is right here. You can see it doesn't do that. And like it's whole runaround. So yeah, app stores are not very transparent.
No, and it's why we shouldn't just have two app stores. I mean, at the end of the day, this duopoly of app stores is problematic, right? Because they only have to put the squeeze on two companies and they can take stuff away from us. And, it's part of why EFF has a whole competition area now, is that we began to see that the consolidation, and we've had two telecommunications companies, Verizon and AT&T, for a long time. This is part of the network neutrality concerns. And now we're seeing it with app stores. We're going to see it with other things because of the consolidation of the industry. So it's really important for us to support decentralization, to support open source and other kind of ways for people to get things that don't require either of the big companies. There are people who are trying to build distributed systems where you don't have to rely on Amazon or Google for your cloud storage, right? That's actually pretty hard, given how dominant they are. But I think it's really important. I don't think we can trust these companies anymore that they're going to be neutral. There was a period in which I think it was a safe bet that the companies just wouldn't get involved, and, they would let people sort it out and they wouldn't put a thumb on the scales. And I don't think we can say that's true anymore. We can't trust it.
Near the end of the book, you said that EFF has been instrumental in ending at least one mass surveillance program and dramatically scaling back another. I feel like we haven't seen any major whistleblowers since like Vault 7, which was 2017.
Yeah.
It's been a while since we've had was it Mark Felt? Well, he was Deep Throat.
Mark
Mark
Klein.
Klein. Yes, thank you.
Was 25, and then Snowden was 2013.
Exactly. So how can we get more insight into what the government's doing right now? Because to me, it feels kind of like a Vatican Secret Archive thing where it's like, you have to know what book you're looking for and then we'll go find it. It's like, well, if I don't know the programs there, how do I do a FOIA request?
Yeah. I mean, I think that I do worry about that a lot, and I don't think it's a unreasonable concern. While I don't like the FISA Amendments Act, Section 702, theoretically, Congress is supposed to have oversight over these things, and many more things have to go in front of the FISA court. Are there things that could be outside of that structure that they're doing in secret that we don't know about yet? Absolutely. We just have to wait and see. They are not supposed to be doing other secret things.
Right.
But I mean, not supposed to, as in, I don't think the law gives them space to do a lot of it, because that's part of what Congress tried to do, was to bring them all under this umbrella of congressional oversight and FISA court oversight. Now, they didn't do enough. And right now, I'm worried Congress is asleep at the switch, right? So I think it's worth it to be worried. But yeah, we're going to have to wait and see. It took, after the Patriot Act was passed in 2001, it took until 2006 before Mark Klein walked into our door. So, and we had heard rumors. We'd heard lots of rumors about lots of things we knew. We were actually preparing a complaint with some of these things. We had enough information. I don't have the same trickle of information right now about new programs, but I don't take much from that. Like that, I don't trust that means there aren't things. But look, 702 is up for renewal in April. They're talking about kicking it down the road again because it's actually pretty controversial. It's not sure they can get it, but this is a good time for people to show up and try, because they are looking deeply. Senator Wyden did, the Wyden siren, I think is what they call it. He gave
I just heard that for the first time the other day.
I just learned that. They gave one of those speeches where he said, if the American people knew what I knew, they would be upset. So that tells me there's stuff going on there. Although what he said was not necessarily, I didn't parse it to mean there's a whole other program we don't know about as much as if the American people knew how they were interpreting the rules that they have so far, they would be very upset. But yeah, those are the kinds of things we watch for. We watch for whistleblowers. We watch for people like on the intelligence committees like Wyden, who are courageous and try to do as much as they can without crossing the line. And if we learn about more, we'll jump on it. It's an ongoing, maybe it would end someday, but in general, like the national security people are playing the long game. And the long game for them is that nothing happens anywhere on the globe that they don't have access to, collect it all, manage it all. I understand why they have that philosophy, but it's a disaster for the rest of us. Yeah. And I think it's very dangerous. And I think it is dependent on this idea that they are honorable and will never misuse this power that is just demonstrably false. It was false before the Trump administration came into effect, but it's definitely false now. They fired all those guys. Yeah. All those guys who used to tell me, don't worry, we have internal protocols and we would never do anything wrong. They all got fired and their clearances pulled. So that's got to tell you something. Like that happened because the Trump administration doesn't have the same sense of honor and the idea that it would never misuse these tools in ways that are problematic from civil liberties that their predecessors did. And again, I think we're seeing that. We're seeing it in a bunch of different places with the Trump administration. I see no reason to not think that's the same is true here.
Last question, turning it over to you. Is there anything I didn't talk about that you want to bring up?
No, I just really thank you for doing this. I think you're doing really heroic work out here. I was really psyched to hear from you. And I think that having people all throughout the country who are trying to get the message out and also really demystify privacy and make it accessible to people, I just think it's fabulous. And I hope you continue to do it.
Oh, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. We want to thank Cindy so much for being so generous with her time and sharing her wisdom with us. Her new book, Privacy's Defender, is out now and available through MIT Press, bookshop.org, or wherever you buy your books. You can even get a copy by becoming an EFF member, which will help support the fight for privacy rights at the same time. I read the book and I loved it. And many of the questions I asked in this interview were directly inspired by it. So if this video interested you, definitely grab a copy. We barely scratched the surface. Also, if you like this video, you may enjoy our interview with journalist Taylor Lorenz that we published in December, where we talked about age verification, free speech, and some of the laws that the US is currently considering and how they would impact the internet.